Hello and welcome to the Herdline Podcast, hosted by Trace Johnson and the Herds Headset. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode where the Headset and Trace talk all things Marshall athletics. Be sure to follow us on X and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Now, sit back, relax, and let's talk the herd.
Welcome back to the Herdline Podcast, and I hope you all have checked your calendars lately because we have reached March. It is the biggest time of the year for college basketball, men's and women's, and we're going to dive into it today pretty deeply. The Sun Belt tournament is rapidly approaching, and we are ready to talk a little bit of Herd men's and women's basketball for their conference tournament hopes. It's been a very action-packed the last week with games and some good results, some bad results. We're going to touch on that as well. But the crux of today will be about that Sun Belt tournament coming up in Pensacola, Florida for both the Herd men and women. Both have a relatively solid chance of competing and possibly winning that tournament. The women's have a little bit of a harder stretch because of how many games they have to play. But we'll get into all that as the episode progresses. But in the meantime, Headset, how's it going, man?
It's going great, man. It's going great. Last weekend obviously was not ideal by any means. Looking back, it was really a tough weekend overall. Baseball, of course, got the series win against Butler. We'll talk more about that later on in the episode, I'm sure. But Marshall's in a very just strange place, it seems, because on one end, they're still in a very good position to be able to go on and make a lot of noise in this March Madness that we are about to, start here very soon. But on the other side, too, there's lots of disappointment there at the end of the season. So it's a very strange spot to be in. And I'm looking forward to kind of having the conversation today a little bit more in depth as to where we are. But still, anything can happen in March. You just never know. And so, it's always exciting. Whenever you get into a tournament, it's always going to be a good time. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
No doubt. Most unpredictable time of the year for basketball for sure. Absolutely. Both sides. It's just, you just never know what's going to happen. And it was a very mixed bag. Yeah. That's kind of what the word I was thinking, the phrase I was thinking. It was a very mixed bag kind of week for Marshall. Talking a little bit about both basketball programs, men's and women's, they kind of had a mixed bag of stuff. So I figured we'd start with a couple of the men's games of last week. The first game, they actually played pretty well and beat Old Dominion 97-88. That was a big win. They needed that win to set up the next game against Georgia Southern, which was the one that was not quite so nice. That's the one I got a lot of stats, a lot of things around that game and certain things I want to get out there. But as you all know, Marshall dropped the game to Georgia Southern 99-82. Very deceiving score because that was a neck and neck game through the first 35 minutes of that game. It was weird. And then in the last 5 minutes, it just got really out of hand. And it was just very inexplicable. And it was ugly. It was just flat out ugly. No other way to describe it. Matter of fact, it was a 75-73 game with 5 minutes and 8 seconds left of the game. And then at that point, Georgia Southern ended the game on a 24-9 run to end. And then in the final 2:15, it was a 13-2 run. Just not ideal. I mean, it was just Georgia Southern, this is what they do. They first half barely could hit anything from three. Barely could hit a single three-pointer in that first half. Second half, couldn't miss. I mean, it was Harlem Globetrotters. They were throwing them up from everywhere on the court, and I was just so disgusted. But it was very, very unideal, as they say. They were 3 of 12 from the three-point line in the first half, 10 of 14 in the second half. I mean, are you kidding me? You're not going to be able to survive that. And it's not like Marshall didn't shoot the ball well. They actually outshot Georgia Southern from the field. And they shot 40% from three themselves. But when you're knocking down 10 out of 14 in the second half, 13 for 26 for the game, that's hard to overcome. It just is. Another big aspect of the game that really hurt Marshall was turnovers. A lot of turnovers in that second half. It was very evident. It was a 14 turnover to 8 turnover advantage for Georgia Southern, and they had a 24-9 edge in points off turnovers. That was really the difference in the game right there, was turnovers, just sloppy play. Herd actually led it to half. It was 40-38, But in the second half, like I said, the last 5 minutes just got really bad for the Herd. Georgia Southern ends up outscoring Marshall 61-42 in the second half. 61 points in the second half. I mean, that's going to be hard to overcome. Field goal percentage from the field, like I said, Marshall actually outshot them 54% to 53%. 3-point line, 13-26 for Georgia Southern, 8 of 20 for Marshall, so that's not bad either. Free throws, 20 out of 24 for Georgia Southern, 16 out of 23 for the Herd. They left a few points there at the line. And then rebounds, typically how Marshall's been doing. They got out rebounded 33-28. Nothing that bad, but still enough to be a difference. They got several open looks off of second chances. So it was very disappointing because that could have been Marshall's first tied or outright regular season title since 1988. They just crapped the bed in the final 5 minutes. I mean, that's just the only way you could describe it. It was disappointing. I tweeted it was going to take a while to get over this one, but it didn't take as long as I thought because somehow, some way they got the 2 seed, and we'll get into that later. But just talk about this game a little bit first, and what do you think about it? Because I know it was very sour overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I think we first got to start with some good stuff. The fan base showed up, on this particular 9:00 evening, and that's a tough, start time for some people to get out to the game. But the overall attendance was 5,167 people there in the Cam Anderson Center, and so Herd Nation showed up. They showed out. They were loud. They were in the game. They were involved. And so, when Marshall's in a big moment, as always, the Herd faithful always comes out and they support our guys. And so, I got to commend all of the fans. I got to say thank you to everybody who took the time to be able to go out and support our guys and our girls both. Really, both games were very well attended. So that's a very, very good thing, and that's exciting news. However, after the game and different things, there's a couple of different thoughts that I've got. First and foremost, I just don't want to play Georgia Southern anymore in any sport. I mean, it's
Can't
just
stand
awful.
them. Yeah,
we just cannot seem to overcome them, and even it's kind of like Coastal Carolina in a sense too. Football last year it wasn't that big of a deal, but it just seemed like they have always had our number. And Georgia Southern's kind of like one of those other teams to where they often have our number as well. And it just so happens that both times Georgia Southern played Marshall, I mean, they just played their best and most complete games of the entire season. They threw everything up. They made just about everything. So that's one problem. But then, like you just said a moment ago, talking about the down the line statistics whenever we're getting closer to the end of the game, truth be told, Trace, I really just don't think, and this is no disrespect to anybody that's on the team, but overall, I just don't think that we have a fantastic team top to bottom.
Right.
We've got a talented team. We got a lot of good players. I'm not trying to knock any of them. They can shoot, they can, do a lot of athletic things. But the problem that I'm just finding is that our team is just not complete. It's just not there right now. And we talked about the rebounding, and of course, Van Komen still being out. Yeah, that's a problem. But that goes back to the main point. If you don't have anybody on your team that's going to be able to have some supplemental value whenever one of your guys goes down, that just goes to show that you don't have a complete and whole team. And all season long, they've been in spots where they could have made some noise. They've been in positions where they could have won some very good games, but they just can't seem to get over that last little bit, that last little hump, and put it all together. And so we have what I would consider to be an okay to good team, but we do not have a great team. Right. And that's saying something too, because it's amazing to know that we are now the 2 spot in the entire conference. And we finished second in the entire Sun Belt Conference. And, we've talked back and forth. We tried to kind of, encourage ourselves and say, well, the Sun Belt really isn't that bad, but looking top to bottom and seeing even out of conference schedules and what their records were, then they finally get to the conference. The Sun Belt top to bottom, man, in my personal opinion, it just isn't it's not very good at all. And Marshall seems to kind of regress a little bit. I think me and you were texting back and forth this weekend, and looking back on the last 10 years of Marshall basketball, they have been in very good positions. They went to the tournament. They had some fantastic teams that won 20 plus, games multiple years, and they seem to be building towards something. However, whenever they move to the Sun Belt, and then we see, transition in coaching and different things, and they seem to not really have taken that next step. They've kind of stayed the same and maybe even regressed just a little bit. And so Marshall is indeed a very, very strange position, because we are the number 2 seed. We finished second in the regular season, and that's fantastic. But I'm not even that happy about it, because Marshall should be at a better and higher level than we are right now, based upon where we were and what we are today. It just seems that something's missing. It just seems that something has not been put together and connected the right way. I can't really tell you what it is. I can't put my finger on it. But I do know I can. I think that if you've been a Marshall fan for any, long amount of time, that you're going to agree that there's just something that is not there right now, that old teams in the past, and even what I would declare was a tougher conference in basketball, being the Conference USA, when you had Western Kentucky and you had all these other different teams that were, at least pretty good.
Right.
Just something's different. Marshall definitely, whenever we came in the Sun Belt, should have been able to take over and move up to that, number 1, number 2, number 3 spot, but not even just being in those positions like we are right now, but winning 20 plus games, even 22, 23, 24 games in a Sun Belt conference as weak as it is. That's not far-fetched whatsoever. So it's a bittersweet feeling right now. I'm still excited. I'm going to watch the games whenever they play. And, I'm not giving up, so to speak, on the team. But at the same time, I have no expectation. I fully am prepared to be able to lose the first game that we play in this tournament, even though we are a higher seed. So it's really, it see what happens in Pensacola. Like we said, March is a time for miracles. It's a time for Cinderella stories. So you really have no idea what could happen one way or the other. I'm hopeful, but I have no expectations as of right now.
No, and that's a really good way to look at it. I mean, that's what I was saying, is like Marshall could just as easily win those 2 games or lose the first one just as easily either way. I mean, it's literally 50-50. You just don't know what you're going to get with them. That's been the reoccurring theme all year. Wildly inconsistent. I mean, they got the potential to be as good or better than anybody else in the conference. It's just they don't put it together consistently enough. I mean, and I think I even said it on here one of the last episodes. When's the last time they've had a 3-4 game winning streak or more? I mean, it's been probably since December.
Yeah, start of the season, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they just don't win enough games consecutive. Like, teams start stringing. Well, most teams, except the Sun Belt teams, start stringing together a lot of wins right about now. The Sun Belt, it's one of the drunkest conferences out there. I mean, it just is. It is bizarre, and it's like, what are the odds that Marshall loses that game Friday night, but then everybody else except Troy loses, and they end up with a 2 seed? What are the odds of that? That's just crazy stuff. And I don't want to play Georgia Southern. I cannot stand playing Georgia Southern. Oh my God, they just drive me insane. Like, they're not even good. They're like the 10 seed in the Sun Belt, and they've looked like Golden State with Steph and Clay. I mean, it is really, truly infuriating, because most of these looks weren't that wide open. I mean, yeah, a lot of our defensive issues were not great, and that we gave them some easy looks. But for the most, I mean, there was like a 35-foot 3 that they just threw up in that game the other day, and they made it. I'm just like, okay, that's gross. I mean, that's just gross basketball. You're just getting lucky. But it is what it is. I mean, and to back that up a little bit more, I figured this out. So in all of Georgia Southern's Sun Belt games they played this year, including us, they averaged 78.8 points per game in all those games. They average 100 points a game against us. 100 points a game against us. That is ridiculous. 2 games this year they played against Marshall. 200 combined points and 28 out of 58 from the 3-point line. 48% from 3. That's disgusting. There's no excuse for that. And it's infuriating, because they're not that good, and we should not be getting just blitzed by them twice. We just should not be. That should not be happening. And unfortunately, that between them and Coastal losing 2 to each of those teams, that kept us out of the 1 seed. I mean, if you just win 2 out of those 4 games, we're the 1 seed outright, and we're the regular season outright champion. So it's just disappointing, but it is what it is. And you also got to talk a little bit about the fact that they really missed Van Komen. I know this is well established at this point, but it's just so very evident. They just absolutely look lost as can be in the paint on the defensive side. They just look lost. I mean, there's no way to describe it. And I went a little bit with that too. So the first 10 Sunbelt games that Marshall's played with Van Komen in the lineup mostly. I mean, he might have missed like a game or 2 here and there, but he was mainly in the lineup. First 10 games of the Sunbelt, they allowed 72.6 points per game. The last 8 Sunbelt games that they played without him, they are allowing 87.2 points per game. That is 15 more points a game in the last 8 in Sunbelt play. Nothing else needs to be said. There's nothing else that needs to be said. That totally changes the entire team, the entire spacing on the floor. It changes everything. So until they figure out, or if they figure out something to do with paint, perimeter, post defense, whatever, until they figure something out, they're not trusted. They're not to be trusted right now. There's just not a good enough defensive team without him in there. No offense to anybody else, because they got a lot of good players, but they don't have anybody down there that can do what he does. And it's just very evident. It is what it is. So that was very unfortunate. And also to top that, the women's team lost to Georgia Southern in overtime, 78-72. Really disappointing. Had a great end of the game in regulation, managed to get the 3-point play to tie the game and all that different thing. And then they started turning the ball over a lot in overtime. And then Georgia Southern gets the win, which Georgia Southern on the women's side is the best team in the league. So that's not that bad of, obviously, that bad of a loss, but still disappointing, a game they could have had. But, it is what it is. We just got to move on. I mean, we got to move on because we got a lot to play for. And that's what we're going to start talking about right now. Unless you have anything to add about these last couple games, we'll go ahead and get to the Sunbelt tournament.
Well, one thing that just real quick, one thing that has made me the most concerned about our men's team this season, and not so much the women's. The women's have been pretty consistent. They've had a couple of times where they've not, won completely, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt because last year they had a losing record. This year they're in the top 5 in the Sun Belt, in a very tough Sun Belt. So, I'm not going to say too much about the ladies. They've came a long way and they've done a tremendous job overall. But the thing that concerns me the most about the men that it really makes me the most concerned that other teams did not have this problem is it seems like they played their best basketball at the start of the year. Whenever there was the beginning, like you mentioned, like the start of the Sun Belt and the beginning of the season overall, they were playing at a higher degree and a higher level than they are now. It seems that they have regressed within the last couple of months instead of kind of getting that energy and getting some momentum behind them to continue to go on. And so that's why, like, I go back to my main point. I have no expectation. I really think that they got this 2 wins and they're in the big dance. I really don't have that expectation whatsoever because it just seems that we've been holding on instead of, really catching our stride and getting into gear. And it's very concerning. It makes me question a lot of different things. And I'm not here to start questioning as far as coaching and different stuff is, I'm not trying to do that just yet, but that is an interesting thing to think about, that we have not seen that progression like we have even last season, because if you can recall last year, man, they really turned it on there at the end of the year. So that's just an interesting point to me that I've been thinking about. They're not getting better. It seems like they're staying the same, or in a lot of cases, getting worse. Like you just said, with the averaging 15 more points in the last 8 games than they were before. So it's just a big challenge right now. I don't know what they need to do, but something has to be done.
It's got to start now. I mean, if you've got any chance, they got as good a chance as anybody in the Sun Belt tournament to win that thing. Them and Troy. Best 2 chances. So if it's going to start, you better get it together really quick, because there's not going to be, we'll touch on it more here in a minute, but like there's not going to be, by the time the semifinals comes along, there's not going to be any bad teams in it. those are all going to be quality, good teams, like teams that can beat anybody. So it's not going to be a cakewalk. It's not going to be an easy thing. You're not going to be playing Louisiana Monroe. You're going to be playing, a quality team that's probably beat you already. So I just really wish we could see. I really wish hypothetically we could have seen what this team would have done in those last 8 games of the regular season in the Sun Belt. If Van Komen was 100%, I would have really liked to have seen what they would have done, because they're at 19-12 right now. I feel like you got to at least add 2 more wins if he's in there. That's just me. I think I think that would be at least 2 more wins. So at that point, you're probably looking at a regular season championship for sure, which is unfortunate, but and it's next man up. So you've got to figure it out. And I know it's easier said than done, but you have to figure it out. You have to have something else in play. And it just didn't quite work out. So it is what it is. But you know what? Even if they would have won, that's the ironic thing. Even if they would have won that game, they still be the 2 seed. So they're the exact same position. The only difference is they could have had a Sun Belt championship, could have probably hung another banner, but that's the only thing that's missing. But with that being said, man, it is time for some Sun Belt tournament, the weirdest, most crazy looking tournament bracket you'll ever see in your life. I mean, it is absolutely just insane to look at. Just looking at it just looks crazy. And Marshall, like we said a couple times already, Marshall has the 2 seed. They were in a 6-way tie for second place in the Sun Belt. 6-way tie. I mean, that is hard to believe. The top 7 teams in the Sun Belt were separated by 1 game in the standings. That is wild. And I'm glad for a convoluted tiebreaker system, because I would not want to play more than 2 games, potentially. I would not want, because I don't trust them to play more than that. I don't trust them to play 2 games. But I definitely wouldn't trust them to play 3 or 4. That's for sure. So we'll just start with Marshall's side of the bracket. We'll just start there. Go over these matchups real quick. The 14 seed Louisiana Monroe plays 11 seed Old Dominion. That is actually, the tournament starts up tomorrow as the time of this recording. So that'll be tomorrow. And then we've got the winner of that game going on to play the aforementioned Georgia Southern. So go Georgia Southern. Actually, hope you look good against somebody else besides us for once. But I hope they get bounced quick, honestly. And then the winner of Georgia Southern and that first game will play Arkansas State, who's the 7 seed. Georgia Southern is the 10 seed. Winner of that game will play the 6 seed South Alabama. Winner of that game will play 3-seeded Coastal Carolina. And then whoever wins that will play Marshall in the semifinals next Saturday at 7:30, and it could be anybody. It could be literally anybody almost in that side. You could play Coastal, you could play South Alabama, you could play Arkansas State, you could even play Georgia Southern again. If they get hot like they are against us for a week, they could go far. I'm not saying they will, but it's possible. And then if you look at the top half of the bracket, you've got 12-seeded Louisiana playing 13-seeded Georgia State. The winner of that game plays 9-seed JMU. Winner of that game plays 8-seed Southern Miss. Winner of that game plays 5-seed Texas State. Winner of that game plays 4-seed App State. And then the winner of that plays the 1-seed Troy in the semifinals. So we got a lot of different possibilities in this tournament bracket right now. And I don't even know where to start with it, quite frankly. So I'll just defer to you. And where do you want to start? And you can just go with it, because it's actually insane to talk about.
Yeah, it is. It's the craziest conference bracket that I've ever seen in my entire life. And
by far.
Right now it's working in our favor, of course. Like we said, the 1 or 2 spot, it's basically the same. It's kind of interchangeable, doesn't matter. But with that being said, I really do wish we would have won outright the conference in the regular season, because looking at the opponents that we could be matched up against, quite frankly, I'm terrified. Again, Georgia Southern's there, and like you said, if they get hot, they make all the threes that they've been making, they can definitely make a run. But really, the team that concerns me the most is right under Marshall at the number 3 spot, and that is Coastal Carolina. They just have had our number big time. And Georgia Southern, they've had the best games of the entire season, and that's how they've beaten Marshall. But overall, they're not a team that I sit back and I truly and honestly fear for my life about. Mm. Coastal's a little bit different, because I think that the way that their squad is just put together, they're prepared to beat Marshall. That's how they are formulated together. And of course, we lost to them at their spot, and then also at home as well. And so, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know this. Did we have Van Komen the first time that we played Coastal Carolina?
I think back then we would have, yes.
Right. So that's kind of bringing me back to the first initial point. They're built to beat this Marshall team, however
Yeah.
you want to put it together. So that's going to be a tough game if it is indeed Coastal Carolina that comes out of the that bottom division. I don't know what you call it. I guess the bottom division. I really don't know.
Yeah.
But it should be interesting. You know, I'm hoping and having my fingers crossed that somehow Old Dominion goes on a a fantastic run and makes it all the way to this game to where they're going to play Marshall. However, I'm not too hopeful that's going to happen.
No.
But it is like we said, anything can indeed happen. Marshall is the number 2 seed. They got to win 2 games. That's it. 2 games, and they are in the big dance, and they are playing for a national championship. You know,
Right.
They are in the most ideal spot that I could ever desire for them to be in. But looking at these opponents that they likely on paper will be facing, if nothing crazy does happen, I am terrified. I'm just going to be straight up honest with you because playing Coastal Carolina is something that I definitely don't want. Playing Georgia Southern, just based on how things have gone, is definitely something that is not ideal for me either. So I'm hoping South Alabama, Arkansas State. Hey, UL Monroe. Why not them?
Let's
right?
do it, boy. Let's do it.
Let's play them instead. But no. But in all reality, too, you know, if you want to be the best, you're going to have to beat the best. And so, at some point, they'd have to play somebody that's going to be on paper better than them, and that's going to give them trouble. So, you know, it's nothing to be terrified about in all reality. It's nothing to be scared about. Marshall, again, has the potential, if they're able to put it all together, to beat anybody in this conference because this conference is strong. So we'll just have to wait and see how things roll out. I'm expecting that we'll see Coastal Carolina, though, and that's just my guess. That's what I would put if I was a betting man. I'd put money on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably would too. And it is a little bit scary both to think about the teams that we could see in that semifinal round. But I'll be perfectly honest, when I saw this bracket, I know a lot of people were like thinking we got a bad draw. I'll be honest, I think we got a pretty dang good draw. And I'll tell you why. Because if we draw Coastal Carolina again, yeah, they beat us twice. But first time, we just blew it. We lost by 4. We had to lead most of the game. Second game, we just started slow and then almost still won. I do not believe that team can beat us 3 times. I don't. I don't think they can. It is hard to beat a team 3 times in the same season. I'm not saying that they can't. I just don't think that they would. So if it comes to that, I would rather play Coastal Carolina than even on the top half of the bracket against App State, because I don't want to play App State a 3rd time because we pulled that out by the skin of our teeth that last game against them. And then the game at home, it was a nail biter too. So I don't like, it's the same thing. I wouldn't want to play that because we would have to beat them 3 times in the same season. I don't really trust that. When it comes down to that, I just rather play Troy. I mean, because for the one game we played against Troy, it was a close game on the road and we lost like 2 months ago. So like that was a long time ago. Like that, it could be anybody's game at this point. So I wouldn't mind if South Alabama crawled up there in the semifinals or even Arkansas State, because we've beaten both of those teams. And while they're good, they're solid enough teams, I think we could beat them again. So I really do actually kind of like the draw we got in this, because like I said, I would not want to play even Texas State up there in that top half. I wouldn't want to play them right now. They are hot right now. I mean, I would not be surprised if Texas State goes on and gets all the way to the championship. I wouldn't be surprised because they're playing really well. And I know this isn't at home, and they're like one of the best, if not the best team at home in the Sun Belt this year, but they're hot right now. So that could be a team to look out for. But out of the teams that Marshall could play, we're talking Coastal, we're talking South Owl, we're talking Arkansas State. I guess even if you want to say Georgia Southern, I guess. Which team would you prefer? Here's a question. Which team would you prefer them to play in the semis?
Oh, man. Truthfully, I think I'd rather prefer Georgia Southern 3rd time. Kind of going back to what you just said, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. Yeah. And they're not a team that is on paper built strong. They just honestly were incredibly hot the 2 nights that we played them. So I think that if anybody, again, I alluded a second ago and I said, oh, I'm scared. I'm not scared of Georgia Southern. And am I concerned about them? Yeah, maybe a little, because
Mm-hmm.
it's the track record of how the season has gone. But in all reality, I think that if I had my choice to play anybody, it would definitely be Georgia Southern. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of would probably prefer to play a team that's already beat us twice, like Georgia Southern. Like it's the same thing with the Coastal thing. Yeah, I would find it hard to believe they could beat us 3 times. So, but I'll be honest, I would be. I don't know, man. I'd be very scared to play Georgia Southern again. They just seem to have our number, and I can't explain why. But that would require them to. I mean, that would require them to win about 4 games. So that's going to be tough in its own right. So we'll see what happens, but regardless, I think Marshall's got, like I said earlier, between them and Troy, they've got just as good a chance to win the whole thing, either one of those teams. There's no more home courts. It's all neutral sites. You just got to play well for 2 days. I mean, that you can't really ask for more than that, because after they lost that last game to Georgia Southern, man, you could have saw them fall. I thought they were going to fall all the way down to 5 or 6. So I was really worried. And then everybody else started losing. And I'm like, okay, so we still got a chance. So you know what? If it comes right down to it, I would rather win this tournament than win the regular season for obvious reasons. I'd rather have that. So if they can turn it around and win 2 games, I'll forgive. I'll forgive it all. But we'll see what they do. But it ought to be really wild time in Pensacola for sure. So looking at the women's side as well, while we're talking about it, we got Marshall over on the top half of the bracket on the women's side. They are the 5 seed. Could have been honestly as high as maybe the 2 or the 3 seed if they had beaten Georgia Southern that last game. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. So the women's team is the 5 seed. Looking at that top half of the bracket, the first game features 13 seed App State against 12 seed South Alabama. The winner of that game plays the 9 seed Coastal Carolina. And then whoever wins that game plays Texas State, the 8 seed. And then whoever wins that game will play Marshall in game number 7. And then if Marshall can advance there, they got to play 4 seed James Madison. And then you got 1 seed Georgia Southern before the championship game. So we got a lot of tough teams up there. I mean, like we've talked about it on here, that the top half of the Sun Belt Women's Conference is really difficult. I mean, Marshall had a 23-win, 13-win in conference team, and they were a 5 seed. So that shows y'all right there. It's a tough league. So what do you think about the Herd's chances to go on a run here? They would have to win 4 games to win the whole thing. What do you think about their chances? Unfortunately, that last game just didn't work out. They could have really ended up with a higher seed, but what do you think about it?
It's tough. It's going to be difficult for them to, get those 4 games because, James Matt, they're a tough team. That Georgia Southern team that came in the other night too. I mean, they are a fantastic basketball team.
Yeah.
The way that they were able to respond in overtime and just kind of, turn it on there and find a way to really just pull away. So, it'll be tough. But the good news is, like you just mentioned a second ago, every one of those teams are within like 1 or 2 games of each other. And it's not like a huge gap in talent between any of these squads. So Marshall is right there in the middle of the pack with everybody. They have just honestly as much chance of being able to get some of these wins as anybody else does. And I'll even say it this way. A lot of the people that are on this team, these ladies on the team, were on that team last season where they made that run all the way from the bottom right there towards the end. And so, I mean, if anybody's geared up and has an ability and an opportunity to make a run, I really do think it's our ladies. And maybe this is the definition of what kind of team that the girls will be from this point on. Like, they're going to be trying to get a good spot all year long for the conference tournament, but when you get to the conference tournament, you turn things on to that next level. Maybe that's the identity. We'll find out. We'll see here in just a little bit of time, but I surely am hoping that is the case because that would be a fantastic thing to just watch our girls go on another run just like last season, however, finish the job. And they have they have all the potential and all the talent to be able to do it. It's just a matter of finding the opportunity to do so because they are going to play some tough teams. It's not going to be an easy road, but hey, they've got a shot at doing it.
They've got a shot. And I think despite the fact that they lost that game last Friday, I feel like that gave them a little more confidence because the first time they played Georgia Southern, it was a blowout loss on the road just like a week before that. This time it was overtime. I mean, it was an overtime game where it was anybody's game, and Marshall just made a few more mistakes in overtime that cost them. So if they can go on a run, you got to win one to win. Got to win one before you can win them all, right? So you got to win one. But, man, if they get to that semifinal round and they can play Georgia Southern again, they would have to beat Marshall 3 times. And it'd be a tall ask, even for Georgia Southern, who's the best team in the women's side right now. So that would be a tough game. But I think Marshall has a great chance if they can just start doing what they've been doing all year. It was a little uncharacteristic there in that overtime period against them last week. A lot of turnovers, sloppy play. That's not really the makeup of that team. So if they can get back to basics, I like their chances to go on a run. I mean, 4 games in 4 days is tough, but they did it last year in a different way. So if they do it this year, they're dancing. So we'll see what happens, but I think they got a chance regardless.
And I'll say this too, there's a difference. Sometimes you have depleting losses, and I think that's what the men just suffered through. Like,
Right.
You're trying to build that momentum and you're trying to make that run, and everything is looking good if you just are able to get over this small hump, and then, you take that loss as like the wind is out of your sails. But then I think there's also what we would call defining losses. And I
Yeah.
think that's what the women just encountered a couple of days ago, because, like you said, a week before they got blown out on the road. And this time they were in overtime and they made it a game. They made it close, just barely couldn't get over that little hump. But it's not in a way to where I walked away from that game saying, oh, well, the season's over.
No.
We're just done. We're completely defeated. We're out of here. No, I think that was a win that could say, all right, we had them. We were right there. We know what we did not execute on, and now we know what we need to do. And that maybe woke them up to the point where, hey, let's make this run. Let's make history here.
Right. I agree. I think that could be, it was probably deflating in the moment, but now looking at it, I mean, Georgia Southern has not lost very many games in conference. They've lost 2 out of 18 tries. They've lost 2. So, I mean, that's not a team that loses very often when it comes to Sun Belt action. So the fact that Marshall pushed them that far and had them on the ropes, that really says a lot. So hopefully that can instill some confidence there. Also, I wanted to ask one, I just thought of this literally just like 2 minutes ago, but I figured this would be kind of a fun question to ask. So looking at both teams, men and women's, let's say hypothetically they both win. Boy, that'd be great, wouldn't it? They both win the tournament. They both end up in the NCAA tournament. What seed would they end up being? What's your prediction?
Marshall, I mean, 14, 15, 16, like the men's. I mean, there's no way that they're a 12 or above. I mean, just not. No. And I don't think they would be a 16. I think that's going to be reserved for more of the lower tier FCS, but we are not going to be that much better than those lower tiers. I think 15, 14. The girls are a different story. I think they could get a 12 seed. And I don't think that's unreasonable by any means. They've had a good season. And if they're able to make this run, man, what are they 23 wins right now?
23, yeah.
All right, you put +4 on that. That's a good win total right there. I mean, that's eye popping. Oh yeah, they won how many games? So
right.
I think that being a 12 seed is completely reasonable for them if they're able to run the table and get those 4 wins and make it into Big Dance.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. I mean, just think 2 years back whenever Caldwell led them to the Big Dance, I think they were 13 that year, and they had like 27 wins. So if that would be roughly the same amount of wins that they have now, so I could see them being a 13, maybe even a 12 if they get depends on I know a lot of that has like the net ratings and all that kind of stuff has a lot to do with that. So that would be a good place to be though, 13, 12, 14 even. For the men's side, I think their best case scenario would be a 14. I think that's best case. But realistically, if it was a 15, it wouldn't surprise me. But I would expect either one of those. So realistically, you'd be looking at playing like a UConn or a Purdue or a Florida or somebody like that. That's not really ideal. But you know what? I don't even care. They could play the freaking Golden State Warriors of 2015. I don't care. As long as they get to the NCAA tournament, I'm happy. I really don't care at that point. But I would like to see I'd like to see both of them get there, obviously, but it'd be interesting to see what seed they would be because it just depends on the matchups. It's all about your matchups and your draw. So we'll see what happens. But before we totally move away from basketball, there's a couple little things to add here that just came out today as the time of this recording. We have new all-conference honors to talk about here. On the men's side, Wyatt Frick's first team all-conference. I'm just so happy for him. I mean, that he's had such a long career here. He's been with part of a lot of different a lot of different teams, a lot of different situations, scenarios. He stuck it out. In today's landscape, to be here for 4 or 5 years is unheard of, and he has. I mean, it's just awesome to see his growth and his development from a seldom used bench guy that didn't get a whole lot of time playing to a first team all conference guy, and he's been a beast in this last month of the year. He's had some huge games. Very happy to see him get first team. Very well deserved. And then Jalen Spear ends up second team all conference. Happy for him. That's a great spot to be. He had a really solid year. Both of those guys put up 15 points plus a game. Gotta love to see that. Awesome stuff. And then the women's side, we have Tamaya Lewis-Utsi, who's first team all conference and newcomer of the year. Very well deserving. She was an absolute monster this year. Just a beast. And you could have made the argument that she could have been player of the year. And I think if they would have ended up being like that 1 to 2 seed range, I think she probably would have been player of the year. But because they were down to 5, they probably dinged her a little bit. But she had a phenomenal year, just came out of nowhere. Very excited to see what she can do in this Sun Belt tournament and hopefully beyond that. So congrats to those players that got those honors. Very well deserving. Great players for the Herd. So moving on now to before we wrap things up, we're going to talk about baseball a little bit. They've had a very important series that they just had at home. Needed to get some momentum, and they got some momentum. So they did what they needed to do. They had a 3-game series against Butler. It was looking a little bit 50-50 there for a minute. It was a little worrisome for a little bit there. The 4-3 win over Butler on game 1, they played well. Then a 7-2 loss versus Butler in game 2 was not very ideal. But then they rebounded with a 3-1 win on game number 3 to take the series 2 out of 3 with a 14 strikeout performance. That was crazy. I think Steve Cotton tweeted that that's never happened that he knows of ever. So big time stuff there. That gives us hope moving forward for the pitching because that has been a big downfall so far this year. It's been pitching, not so much starting pitching, but reserve pitching. So it's nice to see that's not solid. That's spectacular. It's nice to see a spectacular pitching performance, and hopefully we can string together some more of those. So what do you think about all that with baseball? Is that how important is it to finally get back home, number one, and then to win the series and get a little momentum going?
Man, it's huge. I mean, Marshall's has been on a bad skid. They just could not get anything going, it seemed like. And whenever they would, the relief pitching that would come in would just give up 4 or 5 runs, blow a lead. So, it was tough sledding there for a little bit. But, Butler, like we talked about in the last episode, they're not a very good baseball program. And they're just not on that same level as what Marshall was trying to aim to be. And so, it was good for them to come back home first and foremost. It seems like their season really does always begin whenever they do come home for that first time. It's just how that always works. And so it's good to see a little bit of momentum now, winning some of those games that you needed to win. And again, like you said, Kenyon Collins, the ONA product, may I say, West Virginia boy, coming out and just breaking a school record, 14 strikeouts on that Sunday performance on just 4 hits. I mean, just fantastic stuff. Really, Marshall has got one of the best starting rotations in the Sun Belt. There's just that's bar none. That's not really even controversial thing to say. They are fantastic starters. And we'll come back to it. We'll talk about it all the time until they fix it. The bullpen's going to always be an issue. It's going to be a problem. And so it's going to be interesting to see. We're recording this episode March the 2nd on a Monday. And the very next day, tomorrow, they'll be in Blacksburg, Virginia, playing the Hokies. And that's going to be a tough one. That's one of the games where you go on the schedule and you get excited about because Virginia Tech's always got a good baseball program. program, but they'll be in the midweek. And so with the midweek games, you never know how those things go. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 100-99 at the final, because this is how those seem to go. But really, it'll be good to see our bullpen guys get some action, get some experience there. That's the main thing. And I'm really hoping that they can kind of begin to turn a corner. If there's ever time to turn a corner, it'd be against the toughest really opponent that they faced all season long with the Virginia Tech Hokies on the road in Blacksburg. So, but overall, I think Marshall's finally kind of getting some things rolling. I don't know if they're going to – we'll have to see again what happens on Tuesday. But then they come back home for this next weekend with a nice series at the Jack once again. And so things are looking up. Finally, the sun is coming out both outside and also for the Herd overall. And so good things are ahead, I do believe, for Marshall baseball. This is usually the time of the year around March whenever they start to get really focused in and we see them take it up a notch. And I have full confidence in Greg Beals and how he's managing the ball club. I think they'll get there no problem. You got to also remember, too, we got some new guys coming together. And baseball is different. You know, it's kind of an individual game also with the teammate game. It's very strange. But it does take a little bit of time for some guys to get kind of acclimated to a new place, also with new teammates and the tendencies in the field and different things like that. So, you know, it takes time. But I think that after this first couple of weeks of the season, we're kind of getting our footing, got some momentum behind us with this series win, and I'm looking forward to a good week of baseball this week.
No doubt. And it's a huge game coming up against BT. I mean, that's going to be – it's a big one. I mean, that's a measuring stick kind of game. And that's the best team that they'll have probably played so far this year. And it'll be telling to see how they hold up against a team like that. So, yep, that was a big – I mean, they needed to get that series win despite Butler not being great or anything. They needed to get the win, the series. I mean, it would have been better if you had got the sweep, but it is what it is. You can't walk before you crawl, right? So we gotta start somewhere. You know, it had been a kind of a rocky stretch there lately. So glad to see him get back on in the win column as far as the series goes, and hopefully we can surprise people and beat Virginia Tech, and then they come back here in a couple months. So that'll be cool to see them come back here. So a lot to look forward to there as well. But that being said, I think that pretty much does it for this episode. We got a lot coming up. I mean, we got a lot to talk about. We will have a lot to talk about next week when we come back on here, no matter what happens with the Sun Belt tournament, whether they bomb out in the first game or whether they win the whole thing. We're going to have a lot to talk about. So, and depending on how it goes, depending on how far they get, we might pull out of spaces on Twitter. Who knows? I'm just saying that's at least possible, if not probable, depending on how they do. So we'll see how it goes, but let's just win it. Let's just win the whole dang thing. Let's just do it. Why not? Why not us? Just do it. Both teams. I don't even care. Let's just see. I don't think there's never been a year where both programs have made it to the big dance at the same time. So why not now? Let's just rock and roll and make it happen. But unless you got anything else to add, man, we'll go ahead and close it out.
I'm good. Go Herd.
Go Herd, baby. Let's get this done. See y'all later.